Tonight, a controversial, and we do mean a controversial, naval strike, a dramatic shakeup in Ottawa, and the surprisingly heated debate over your Christmas tree. Three very different stories one night. From Montreal, this is episode 62 of Night Talk Canada. I'm Gary MacDonald. Tonight, Eddie is in the air flying home. Filling in for Eddie is someone I'm sure you'll recognize from a previous stream talking about stress and mental health. He's also a political junkie. He's a regular contributor to the comments during our streams and a longtime friend. From Rothsay, New Brunswick, Greg Zed. Greg, welcome to the program tonight.
Pleasure and an honor and a privilege to be here with you tonight.
Well, looking forward to having some great discussion, and so let's get busy. First up tonight, dramatic developments in the U.S. crackdown on suspected drug runner boats. A second strike, this one far more controversial, hit a vessel and two survivors. Now here's what's new, what's being denied and what it could mean. Last week we discussed the Trump administration's war on suspected drug-running boats headed for the U.S. On Friday, new reports surfaced about a second strike against one of the vessels on September 2nd, a strike to kill two survivors of the initial hit, clinging to debris. Now that has sparked outrage from human rights groups and questions about the legality of the whole thing. The White House has been scrambling, and they've been denying and authorizing, pointing fingers from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, giving the order to the administration, all kinds of statements going back and forth. So let's have a look at how the White House addressed it yesterday.
To be clear, does the administration deny that that second strike happened, or did it happen and the administration denies that Secretary Hegseth gave the order?
The latter is true, Abe, and I have a statement to read for you here. President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have made it clear that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated. And I would just add one more point to remind the American public why these lethal strikes are taking place. Because this administration has designated these narco-terrorists as foreign terrorist organizations. The president has a right to take them out if they are threatening the United States of America and if they are bringing illegal narcotics that are killing our citizens at a record rate, which is what they are doing. And under the previous administration, there was enough fentanyl trafficked into our country to kill every American man, woman, and child many times over. And so that's why you've seen a drastic difference in this administration's policy with respect to the last, and it's one of the many reasons the American public re-elected this president and support this Secretary of War in conducting these strikes.
So to be clear, to clarify, Admiral Bradley was the one who gave that order for a second strike.
And he was well within his authority to do so. Jackie.
Thank you, Caroline. Following up on Gabe's question, you said that the follow-up strike was lawful. What law is it that allows no survivors?
The strike conducted on September 2nd was conducted in self-defense to protect Americans in vital United States interests. The strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict.
Yesterday, at the beginning of a Trump cabinet meeting, Hegseth had more to say.
We've only just begun striking narco boats and putting narco terrorists at the bottom of the ocean because they've been poisoning the American people. And Joe Biden tried to approach it with kid gloves and allowed them to come across the border. Cartels take over community, 20 million people, hundreds of thousands of Americans poisoned. And President Trump said, no, we're taking the gloves off. We're taking the fight to these designated terror organizations, and it's exactly what we're doing. So we're stopping the drugs, we're striking the boats, we're defeating narco-terrorists, and we're standing...
And you may say one thing, that drugs coming in through the sea by sea are down 91%. And I don't know who the 9% is.
I'm not sure either, sir.
But down 91% by sea.
We've had a bit of a pause because it's hard to find boats to strike right now, which is the entire point, right? Deterrence has to matter, not arrest and hand over and then do it again, the rinse and repeat approach of previous administrations. This is meant to get after that approach. And I will just end by saying, As President Trump always has our back, we always have the back of our commanders who are making decisions in difficult situations, and we do in this case and all these strikes. They're making judgment calls and ensuring that they defend the American people. They've done the right things. We'll keep doing that, and we have their backs, Mr. President.
Now, declassified video of the hit has been released. Some may find its content disturbing. And there's no audio with this, just the video of the strike. And on the video, personally, I couldn't see where the two survivors were clinging to debris, but I'm sure if you had a better quality image, which the US would have, that you might have a better idea of what was happening there. But truly, this story broke on Black Friday, and all weekend they were scrambling on the Sunday news talk shows in the US, trying to worm out of this one, because originally it all came back to Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, and the fact that he was the one who said killed them all, and he's trying to brush that off and put it more on the admiral. The admiral was told to take the boats out, and that the admiral had the authority to do so, as you heard the press secretary say in her statement, that they were acting under maritime law, which there are all kinds of questions, Greg, coming out of that. And just before we do that, I just want to bring up a couple of comments, if we may. So we already have some comments, so let's go. First off, right in from Eddie. Hello from Air Canada 778, 35,000 feet over Detroit, and tuning into Night Talk Canada. Thanks, Eddie. And then he comes back with, these guys should create a sitcom, because this is what this is. Problem. However, people are dying, and that's the sad part about it. If you didn't have that involved, it would be just a bizarre thing. Jen says that literally looked like a Saturday Night Live skit. The two of them talking, Trump and Hegseth. Yeah, it actually did look like that. How do you have any credibility, really? You know, Greg, you've been around the political world and the circuit and in other facets of life. How do you have any credibility in a situation like this with the way these people are behaving?
Well, you know, it's funny that you raise that, because I don't think in our lifetime, and Gary, I go back to the days when you and I sat on municipal council, we had a bit of what they would refer to as world order, something you could
Right.
take for granted. There were guidelines, what would probably fly, what wouldn't fly, and things of that nature. Today, regardless of the sheer fact that the American people in droves elected a president, and actually re-elected a president after sitting out one term, and he actually campaigned on a whole raft of things, and he's acting on what he campaigned on, including there are no rules, there are no guidelines, there are no areas for diplomacy per se. And even as we see something in international waters, as the press secretary spoke to, international waters, where's the international community in all of this, where this is allowed, that you can just go in with very little surveillance per se and just take out boats and almost act as if it's wartime. All rules and anything on the international water is out, and it's fair game. And the masses, and often referred to as the mega in the United States, buy it because they say it's getting rid of a huge problem, which no one doubts, and that is the mega drug problem in the world.
Right.
And it's almost like a permission. It's a cultural permission to do whatever it takes to get a bit of law and order. Now, I make one other final comment. The stark reality that we've seen with this administration is when someone fact checks, it's really not accurate. Like the fentanyl coming in from Canada
Right.
and the amount, there's just one example when it works out to 1%. And yes, 1% is too much, but at the same time, it just gives you full permission and it gives you a mandate to do whatever you want. Close the borders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got two things here. One, world order is everything's on the table. You can do whatever you want if you're the United States. And secondly, other world leaders are right now so frightened they don't know what to do or how to react.
Well, I'm sure there is that, and some of them don't want to upset the apple cart, so to speak, because they've managed to hammer out some kind of a so-called deal with Trump on trade. However, like they're very quick when it comes to issues, like with Putin and Netanyahu, and get the world court, get arrest warrants for them, international arrest warrants for war crimes, and here you have the president of the United States, and he's talking about being at war, the war on drugs, but he's talking about being at war, and he's having all of this action take place in international waters. And there are questions within his own country as to how legal this is. And is he playing, and it almost seems to me like, and I'm certainly no legal expert, but it almost seems to me like he's taking bits and pieces from different laws and bringing them together to suit his means. And that's
Exactly.
not, yeah. And all of this going on without any kind of approval from Congress. So, if I understand it correctly, Congress must approve and pass a declaration of war, and I'm not aware of that happening.
In this case, he is saying he has presidential powers, and if you don't believe me, try to test me in court.
Right.
And so he's
Yeah.
using the court system as if you don't like it, challenge it. And that's why in record numbers we have lawsuits on every decision known to mankind.
But to have this happen, like no survivors, you have two people who have managed to survive a direct hit, and they're clinging, and then all of a sudden, bang, another one comes in, and that's it, game over. Is it really necessary? Because again, here's the big thing to me is they've been releasing some of these videos, and Trump's been releasing them on his Truth Social. I question as to how verifiable those videos are. Are they the actual videos, or is it something that in the back rooms they're playing with some of the video that they're getting from the Department of Defense? I don't know, but I don't trust it. And then he's he mixes these laws together so that it appears he has the authority to do it. But when you break them down and take them in context of each law, does he really have authority to do it? But nobody is challenging him. This is what really gets me. And I'll be the first to say, if there is solid evidence, and I have yet to see solid evidence presented by President Trump, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, or any other member of his administration, that these are actual drug-running boats. There's been no solid evidence that I can see. Maybe I missed it somewhere along the way. Maybe I was hiding under a rock somewhere. I don't know. but you don't hear very much about the solid evidence.
No. And the
So,
other thing, Gary, you have to recognize, and we're going in other forums the same way, we can't anymore determine what's fact and fiction. Almost in
right.
every facet. Um, and I'm sure Eddie will get a charge out of this as he flies over Detroit, licking his lips when the Bruins lost last night. But in any event, there's a prime example where they say one up, Austin Matthews is being traded to the Boston Bruins, for one of their top scorers. Like, is that fake news? Is it not fake news? What do you believe, even in the sporting community, that you pick up online, and who is reliable? So take that and then measure it against anything in the United States where you have someone that doesn't adhere to regulations or picks and chooses, as you say, regulations that fit his need and just quotes it, and then if you don't like it, argue the point. And in a two-party system, that's exactly what you have, where you line up the Republicans who will stand behind Trump, and you have the Democrats who are crying foul because it just doesn't look good. But I think it's a bigger picture than that. It's talking about attacking a country on international waters without any evidence that we see, and they call it firm intelligence. So there's wherein lies the problem.
Right. And I watched a clip of Hegseth today where he said he was not in the room, must have been the Situation Room, when the second attack occurred. He said, I left just before that happened. It was in the Admiral's hands to do whatever had to be done. And he said, I don't remember. He said, he was trying to explain why he wasn't there, try to kind of still push it over away from him, wash his hands of it. And he talked about war fog. I think it was how he phrased it.
Yeah.
And he went right after the media, of which he used to be a part, and just said, you guys wouldn't understand that, but this is what happens in situations. Excuse me, you were sitting in the room watching some monitors. And you weren't even calling the shots at that point. You just put the orders out, and someone else was calling the shots and taking the responsibility. If you have fog or war fog or whatever you want to call it, if you have fog on the brain, I think you had it before you were even appointed Secretary of War. I'm sorry.
Or there's one other thing, and that, in my mind, from what I can see in the year, and bear in mind, we're sitting in Canada. So we have we're just going on media reports and stuff that we form our opinion based on stuff that we see, hear, and read. So we get our opinion from that. But you've got to even take a further step back and look at values. Human life lost, and saying, well, I can justify it because we're in a war. So yeah, sure, in war, everything's on the table. But, they've created this picture that there's a war. In fact, they're building up, airplanes are going down in the Caribbean, and they're building up their forces down there for other
Right.
ground attacks. So we're obviously missing something in the translation that, the United States is ramping up for a much larger scale war on something. And it's war on, in this case, Venezuela. And some people will argue that the Americans have wanted their oil for years and years and years, and that the head of the Venezuela government he's corrupt, and that doesn't make it any easier when they are corruption charges with a lot of world leaders, including the Israeli prime minister, for example. Now we even see the Ukrainian fella. He had to leave because of corruption. So it's very hard for Joe Citizen to decipher fact from fiction. And so you're left to what makes sense, and why are they doing why they're doing whatever they're doing, and what makes it right. It's a very difficult ethical dilemma we citizens are put in.
Now, I do know that there are some investigations, and I believe it's committee investigations underway in the U.S. Capitol now, looking into this whole thing. But how much traction they get remains to be seen. Political fallout. Right now, there doesn't seem to be any hint of any kind of political fallout on the domestic front for Trump and crew. Global reaction, there hasn't. Maybe I've missed. Have you really heard any major reaction from anywhere in the globe on this?
Not at all.
No.
That's what I said 10 minutes ago earlier.
Yeah, and pressure from watchdogs and allied nations, not a lot. So, the thing of it is, though, like if this is all confirmed, the second strike could set a very dangerous precedent. And that is a potential shift toward extrajudicial naval actions. It raises serious questions about oversight, accountability, and civilian protection on the seas. And public trust is at stake. Global norms governing maritime security could be under threat. And it does. It really does set a very dangerous precedent the way it's being handled. And last week, when Eddie and I dealt with this issue, I said, why is he doing it in international waters? Why doesn't he wait till they get into U.S. territorial waters, and then for sure that the boat's headed in your direction, and it gives you even more reason to deal some kind of a blow. But it's all in international waters. Could it be because the maritime law is weaker or very broad in context? I don't know. I have no idea. But I as you say, we are on a very slippery slope here, Greg, and it could be a very dangerous slope. Look at, he tweets out or truths out on Truth Social the other day. He was shutting down the airspace over Venezuela. Well, who gave him the ability to shut down the airspace over a country other than his own?
Exactly.
And there hasn't been so much as a peep about it. Now, maybe he was just floating, how he floats things out there just to see what kind of reaction he gets. And maybe that's what he was doing, and people caught onto it and said, no. But still, for the president of the United States to be sitting there in his bedroom in the White House or his office and posting that on social media, I'm shutting down. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Yeah.
I'm just, in the 30, almost 40 years I've been involved in covering different things I've never seen anything like this. Never. It's a whole different world in that respect.
Precisely. And the interesting thing is it's consistent.
Yes.
It's been consistent. So next week it's going to be something else. Week after it's going to be something else. And with no domestic fallout, even though people tend to say, oh, wait, 3 more years. There's no question that, and there's no guarantee that they're going to throw this fella out quicker than they elected him. And there's no proof or any sanctions whatsoever that are saying they're not happy with his actions. No one's calling him to task, because he's owed so many favors by so many people. If you go against him, he'll call you out and then you're on the sidelines. I think Marjorie Taylor was the last person who was the biggest supporter. Whatever reason she saw fit to leave, she knew that once she's crossed that line, there's just no going back.
Right. Yeah.
So you're either with me or against me, and if you're against me, boy, you better watch out.
Now, and something else I thought of while we've been talking, where is the United Nations? I haven't heard anything from the United Nations either, nor any member countries of the United Nations raising this issue, unless it's being done behind the scenes, but or I've missed it somehow, but I've not really heard anything. And when you do any research on this, you don't see anything coming up. Isn't that something that if it was somewhere else in the world and some other leader involved, don't you think it'd be before the United Nations in a heartbeat?
Exactly. But I think Trump was onto something when he even criticized the United Nations. I think there's a lot of fire there, so to speak, but no power.
Mm-hmm.
Diplomacy will say, we're totally against this, we're totally against that, but get them to do anything. Ukraine's a prime example. How many meetings have they had that they've blatantly come out and said Ukraine needs help, Ukraine needs help? No one's done anything. And again, we're left to our own vices to determine what has United Nations collectively done to support Ukraine, because my way of thinking is if they did 1/4 of what they say with all these meetings and all these posturings, and I include everyone, I would like to know at the end of the day, what have they done to mitigate a war and slow Russia down at all, let alone do anything? Because right now, the war, and we're off topic, and I have a habit of doing that from time to time, but there are similarities. Putin does whatever he wants, and no one's gonna tell him what to do. In fact,
True.
even Donald Trump said, "Oh no, he's a friend of mine, and we'll do this, and we got a possible deal." And in the middle of a possible deal, he's blowing Ukraine up worse now than he did 2 years ago.
Right. Yep. Yep.
So
There's a
no
lot
accountability, lots
yeah.
of talk, but no accountability or direct accountability.
Yeah, exactly. And I know from last week when we first discussed this issue, we did get a lot of comments coming in after the fact when people viewed the segment that I broke out of the show, just specifically on this. And we had a few Americans chiming in, and they weren't very happy about it. And basically, it really sparked some discussion that the like of which I haven't seen with any recent episodes. And as I say, from the American side of it. And some of them, you could tell they were dyed in the wool Trump supporters because they were basically telling us where to go. And one guy was saying, why don't you come and attack us because we're patriots and we'll meet you at the border, sort of thing. Like it was. Some of the comments were bizarre, as happens on social media from time to time. But yeah, really, we pushed a button last week, and hopefully, we're pushing the button again this week because there are too many dots that are not connected, and there's too many open areas where so many precedents can be set, I think, from a legal standpoint. And as I say, I'm no lawyer, but when you look at it in the way that it's being kind of meshed together, that could weaken whatever maritime laws that we have in place going forward. And I think somewhere along the way, that has to start sinking in with other countries, and they have to really start thinking about that and at least speaking up, at least speak up and be heard for sure.
The comment that I would say to that, Gary, and I don't know if it ties in what you and Eddie were talking about last week that resonated with the American viewers, but I would respectfully submit Canadians seem to, I'll use the word seem to, be more dialed into what's going on in world events than Americans. The whole notion when we were upset about the 51st state, just as an example, you talk to the average American, wherever it may be, and they don't even know what you're talking about. And they were saying, what are you mad at us for? What did we do? So I don't know. It's not ignorance, but I don't think they're dialed in. And I don't think the way we tune in and we are worldly, I don't take credit that Canadians are far more worldly, but we seem to be, unless I'm missing something, and I have family and friends in the United States, the conversation and the dialing in and the engagement from Canada seems to be a bit more involved with more detail, and we know more about what's going on in the House of Representatives and Congress than they would ever know about Parliament, let alone in all, the joke for years and years and years is and not a criticism, but just a fact. What do Americans know about Canada and how it operates in the provinces and the weather, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a huge divide, and I would respectfully submit we're more dialed in to world events. We're more dialed into values globally than the two-party system in the United States, where it's you're either for me or against me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could be wrong, but that's the way it seems to be played out. And they're quite faithful behind Trump. And I don't see, even though the polls may say his popularity is waning in some way, shape, or form, when it comes election time, we know that we have 40% on each side, and the undecided are going to maybe change, that. But there's been pretty strong people that have gone down in defeat. And Trump, after all, in the last year, and when I say Trump, I'm talking about the Republican movement, has
Right.
certainly taken on a huge role and really, in the last election, really cleaned up.
Okay, we have another comment to go to, and I think this is a good comment to wrap up this segment with, actually. Jen says, agree with Greg. Americans are often only fed American news, history, propaganda, so on. As someone who spent teen years in the US, I do not remember learning anything in school that touched on other countries. That speaks
Yeah.
volumes to what you were saying, Greg. Volumes.
Yeah.
Very much so. And with that, I think that's a great way to end it. Some food for thought from that perspective overall. So, coming up, Guilbeault resigns, fallout ensues. We hope you are enjoying tonight and Night Talk Canada. If you would like to show your support for our efforts, you can buy us a coffee. Just scan the QR code that you'll see on the screen here in a few minutes, or click the link below, and Eddie and I will appreciate your support. Thank you very much. And I will get that QR code up because I forget it every week for some reason. All right. Well, the political week in Ottawa ended with a bang last Friday after months of rising tensions. Steven Guilbeault. Oh, there. All right. Did you press the button by mistake? It got away from you, eh? Anyway, let's get back to this. And I'll just take it from the top just in case you missed some of that. The political week in Ottawa ended with a bang last Friday after months of rising tensions. Steven Guilbeault resigned from cabinet. He was serving as Canadian Identity and Culture Minister, along with a couple of other roles in the Carney cabinet. He resigned from cabinet citing opposition to the controversial energy deal involving a new pipeline project with Alberta. Now, Guilbeault had served as Environment Minister in the Trudeau cabinet, where he was a lightning rod, very much so a lightning rod for his carbon tax and anti-oil policies. Guilbeault says resigning was the right thing to do.
In our parliamentary system, if you're a member of a cabinet and you disagree with a decision or a policy from your government, then the obvious thing to do is to quit cabinet. That's what I did. But I'm still a member of the Liberal Party, and I still want to contribute to the many causes that I have worked on for many years. I think the economics of world energy are changing. There's obviously still a demand for oil, but if you look at the reports from the International Energy Agency, this demand is going to peak very soon. And you can debate, is it 2028, is it 2030, but is it worth investing billions of dollars? And I think that's why we haven't seen any proponents of the project, whether to the south or to the west coast. There's no companies right now that are willing to put this money because the future prospect of being able to make this a lucrative business are diminishing. I sincerely doubt that a new pipeline will ever get built. We still have carbon pricing, and we will continue having an industrial carbon pricing, but I disagree with some of the fundamental elements in this memorandum of understanding. I think we are putting a lot on the table and getting nothing in return. This idea that we're somehow winning because Alberta's going to increase its industrial price, they need to do that under the federal system anyway. The Pathways project, I believe in carbon capture and storage. The IPCC says we need it, but it's only going to sequester 12% of the oil sands emission. So this idea that we will have decarbonized oil in the Alberta oil sand is not true.
On Monday, Prime Minister Mark Carney performed a minor shuffle, bringing former Trudeau Cabinet Minister Mark Miller from the backbenches back into Cabinet as Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, as well as official languages.
It's nice. Look, I got into politics because I love my country and want to contribute to it.
Public Works Minister Joel Lightbound was given the additional role of Carney's Quebec lieutenant, while Environment Minister Julie DeBruzen added parks and nature to her portfolio. And those clips of Guilbeault were the first in English since his resignation, Greg. And he stopped on the way into the House today to speak to reporters. On the weekend after his resignation broke, he was making the rounds on a number of Quebec TV stations and networks, including a very popular Sunday night talk show on a Quebec network, where he actually got very emotional about the whole environmental thing and what he was working on at the time, and how he saw that this deal was not everything it's cracked up to be, he feels, and that it's tearing down some of the things that he had been working on so hard over his years with Trudeau as environment minister. I give Steven Guilbeault full marks. I'm not a Steven Guilbeault fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I give him full marks for his statement today and what saying that he resigned because it was the honorable thing to do in a parliamentary system as a minister. If you cannot support the government's policies, then resign and go to the backbenches. And he's going to continue to sit as an MP and a member of the Liberal Party. So I really do give him full marks for that. But as I say, I was never a fan of him or his environmental policies. And between Guilbeault and Trudeau and the way they approach the environment, it almost seemed to me that they were in a dreamland somewhere. Even today, in a couple of comments, he was saying there was one comment that we played there where he said and admitted that oil's going to be around for a while. But when you listen to Trudeau and Guilbeault together and with their electric vehicle batteries and their electric vehicle programs and everything, it was like they wanted to basically cut off oil within 5 or 10 years, 5 years minimum. And the fact of the matter is, you're not going to be able to shut off oil. It's going to be almost a generational thing because, I mean, look around your office right now that you're in, Greg. Pretty much everything you put your finger on has oil or oil derivatives as part of its manufacturing process. You don't just turn the tap off overnight. And look at the electric vehicles. The government incentives come off, the sales plummet, and they're also plummeting because of the expense of maintaining the vehicles. And they're not great in the wintertime. Then you have the problem of still trying to find charging stations, and it just keeps going and going and going. And, to me, especially in our climate, I can see a hybrid version. And I've driven in some hybrid vehicles, and to me, that is a good compromise, at least for a good first start. But just to be pushing everything at you the way that Trudeau and Guilbeault were doing, I think was totally wrong. And I think that, as I say, I give Guilbeault full marks for doing the right thing and doing it in a very low-key manner. He didn't go out and make a big deal of it. But he addressed it when it was presented to him after it was leaked out.
I like the idea that you mentioned about the hybrid because I think that what we fail to do, and probably it's a government thing in cycles of government because of the tenure of 3-4 years in the life of an elected government, we don't put many policies out there in a hybrid fashion, whatever it might be. The best example is the car. I mean, it's an all or nothing, this electrical vehicle. They're not tested. We don't know what they're like and how they're going to perform in the winter. We don't really scale up the cost of maintenance of the electrical stations. Then we have to hire people to shovel them out because of the climate, and on and on and on. And we don't seemingly learn from the fact that unless you have transitional planning in anything, it's not going to work. And I think with Guilbeault, I do respect Guilbeault. I'm very impressed with the fact that he came out and he resigned because he was the face of the new green way, if you want. And when he looked at the MOU, he sort of saw right then and there, and he's got as they say, the devil is in the details. He saw the details that he saw that it is really a step back. Where I think he was short-sighted, and it behooves me to say sitting minister's short sight because I don't have all the facts. But if we know that oil, just as an example, is going to be and needing to be around for several, I would say several decades, 10 years, I think, is cutting it short, but I would say 10 to 20 years, then let's get a plan to figure out how you're not going to phase it out, but how you're going to phase in an alternative with a proven record that's field tested, that works. Because
Mm-hmm.
there you got Alberta sitting on resources. We have the same problem in New Brunswick, not to take away from the Alberta MOU, but fracking in the Sussex area. When that was up and going, and the argument was, is it safe? Is it not safe? Who are we going to offend? Whose wells are affected? We'd never get factual information. But if we had a transitional plan of how to get access to these resources that we have from coast to coast to coast, and we cross all the T's and dot all the I's and get buy-in from Aboriginal communities, local, provincial, and federal people, even though the Supreme Court has basically said it's a federal decision, then and only then can we see progress. So I think Guilbeault is correct. He is almost speculating that we'll never see this pipeline because there are so many barriers to it, and the guarantees that are going to be asked for are going to impede the progress. And that's why he said you don't have any private investors. In New Brunswick, we have that same thing with the the pipeline down here. In fact, they've walked away from it. So I don't know where it is. I'm not in government, but the bottom line is we got to start doing a little transitional planning on almost everything that we tackle. And without transitional planning, in my way of thinking, you're fighting with disaster.
Well, on the whole resignation thing, of course, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith came out and said she was happy that Guilbeault was gone as environment minister, and those two were like mixing oil and water, or trying to mix oil and water. It wasn't going to happen, and Trudeau was gone as well, and of course, when you think of Trudeau and Guilbeault together and how they kept, it seemed, trying to hamstring Alberta with its oil projects. And then you go back to Pierre Trudeau, Justin's father, and how he kicked Alberta in the butt as well during his reign, and then even launched a national petroleum company to sell gas across the nation. It just was not a reasonable mix whatsoever. But the thing of it is, and I totally get why Albertans are upset and have been upset, because the hand was always out for the money coming in, so we can throw it back into the equalization payments to the other provinces. A large chunk of would always end up here in Quebec. So I get where Alberta and Albertans have this real distrust, I guess, of Ottawa. But there's another side of this too, and that is the whole thing here in Quebec. Guilbeault was Carney's French lieutenant for a very short span of time, obviously, and he's brought in Joel Lightbound, and from everything I'm hearing, he's well respected within Quebec. However, bringing Mark Miller back into the cabinet. Mark Miller had immigration in the final years of Trudeau, and Mark Miller just happens to be my MP as well. But he had made some statements in the past as immigration minister about the issue around the concern of the French language disappearing in Quebec, and needed, we needed stronger language laws and what have you. Well, didn't he, very meek and mild in the clip we had the day he was sworn in, but a few hours after that or the day after the swearing in, he walks right into the middle of it and basically says the same thing again, that he's tired of hearing about the decline of the French language in Quebec when you look at the statistics are showing that that's not the case at all. Well, Francois Legault, our premier, went right off the rails, calling them despicable and everything else. And that Carney made a huge mistake putting him in as a cultural identity minister and the minister responsible for French language. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all settles out. And of course, Legault right now is looking for any kind of a lifeline that he can grab hold of, because Legault and the CAQ, the CAQ, are in the tank. And they're in the tank so far that I don't think they can see daylight now. In the latest poll, I saw a poll yesterday, and like they are number 3 or number 4, but like they're barely showing up. Whereas you have the PQ and then the Liberals, but the PQ has been building steadily and is in the number 1 spot. And the PQ is also resonating well with a lot of younger Quebecers now. And of course, the PQ is also promising a referendum in its first term. And last week, they're putting out platforms or planks of their plan for separation. And last week, they brought out the fact that they've decided that they will not depend on the Canadian dollar for currency, that they're going to launch their own currency. Well, I don't ever remember anyone asking for permission to use the Canadian dollar as their national currency, but So Mark Miller, he's well respected. He's well respected on the Hill and well respected with the various pundits I've been watching over the weekend. But he's don't let that sort of quiet, low-key approach fool you, because he's got the lines to deliver. And right now, I mean, he launched one over the weekend, and as I say, Legault went ballistic. So is that going to present a problem here in Quebec for Carney? And is that going to keep his Quebec lieutenant really busy trying to iron out everything and keep things running on an even keel? This is going to be a really, really interesting couple of months as we get into this part of it.
Well, the other thing too, Gary, that is noteworthy is Carney was elected, I might add, I do believe 6 months after he visited Rothsay, New Brunswick, and attended church here. And he got in, if you recall, as the best person to deal with Donald Trump. So I think en masses people went that way, and it was enough to even bring back people who left when Trudeau was still around, and they reoffered after saying that they weren't going to run again. So where my point is going is, now we fast forward a bit and we are faced with the same question: what is the alternative? So federally, the alternative, until the progressive conservatives get through their leadership review in January and demonstrate an alternative to any bickering that or breaks in the liberal sign, I suspect they're still going to be firmly in place because we're not really seeing it federally, a divide that would take that away from the liberals. In other words, the conservatives, and it's just my way of looking at it, and maybe I'm a bit sheltered here in New Brunswick, but I'm not sure that Pierre Poilievre has garnered more support or broadened the likelihood of people thinking he would make an appropriate prime minister, rightly or wrongly. I mean, I'm not passing judgment on the gentleman, but it just seems that so the fighting that we're seeing or the difference of opinion where literally the economy represented by Carney making a budget with spending like nobody's business to spend our way out of the trade problems that we're having in the United States. Is that going to resonate with the electorate when it comes time to a federal election? None of the opposition want an election, and that's why the budget passed the way it passed. It wasn't passed because people
Right.
voted in favor of something. They
Yeah.
either stayed away or it was an abstinence. So they kicked that down the road. But I think Carney, because he is the backbone of the economy, it's really going to determine is the economy and who's best for the economy of Canada. It's going to be the ballot question.
Okay, one quick question here, Greg. Do you think the exit of Guilbeault as a high-profile minister in the Trudeau government and high profile, especially in Quebec, really, in the Carney government, do you think his exit reveals any kind of deep divisions within the ruling party?
No, I don't think so. I think he is going to go out as a classy guy. He went out on principle, and
Yeah.
he said, "Look, here's the deal. I'm with Elizabeth May and the Green Party and green energy, and we're going 5 or 10 years back by signing the MOU, and we're not caving to Alberta because you're quite right. For 20, 30, 40 years, Alberta has always felt neglected.
Yep.
They've felt neglected, and this is the first time that an MOU that we're going to use your oil and you got a resource and we're going to help you with the oil sort of thing is taking over because we're getting back into the whole question of reliance on oil because it's being sold as an economic pathway.
Mhm.
The resources that we have equals better economics. Now, the bigger problem, I think, for Carney is he's talking a lot of deals and trades and things like that. It's going to be interesting how more patient people are because we've yet to see anything that says to the average Canadian from coast to coast to coast that they're better off. I don't know of anyone that will say we are better off today than, say, 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that might be a bigger problem to address.
But on the other side of it, because it was neglected for so long, uh, he's out and he's hustling. And in business, you have to make those personal contacts, build those personal relationships, and build that trust. And that takes time before you really see any fruit from those efforts. So I would caution people not to be overly excited about any. You may get the odd announcement where it's like boom and it's right there in front of you, but a lot of this is going to take time. And we had a long time where this was not really the focus of the government of the day.
Precisely, and I
yeah.
think we should give the Order of Canada to Donald Trump because he woke us up. He really woke us up. I mean, I say
well,
to
he
people
did.
even
I don't disagree with that.
I say to people today, why would it be a tariff war for us to finally realize we should be doing much more business in between provinces and territories than we're doing?
Right.
And why are we so, interested in automatically just going south? He woke us up.
Yep. There's no doubt about that at all. No doubt about that, for sure. All right, we do have one more comment related to what we were discussing overall. In Rhyme or Rest W8Z, isn't carbon capture already in use in Saskatchewan in the LNG industry? Not at scale that they want to put in Alberta. And yes, you are right. It is in use in Saskatchewan at the moment. The province has the world's first power station to use carbon capture and storage technology on a coal-fired power plant at Sask Power's Boundary Dam 3 facility near Estevan. And it began operation in 2014. And Saskatchewan actually has multiple carbon capture projects operating, and there's a list of 3 or 4 of them. So they are out in front. And thank you for bringing that up, Rhyme or Rest W8Z. Good to have you commenting. All right. So I think we'll wrap that segment up. There's still a lot of question marks, and I'm sure there will be lots of fodder for great discussions along the way. Coming up, though, guess what? The great Christmas season debate. No, it's not about your favorite Christmas carol or anything like that, but real or artificial? Are you running into roadblocks with your cable-based internet service? Eddie and I did, so we looked for a reasonably priced fiber internet service and we found it. eBox, offering fiber to the home at a reasonable price. Click the affiliate link below for more information, and if you decide to make the change, use one of the 2 promo codes for a special offer. This is not a paid sponsorship. Well, with the holidays approaching, it's time for an evergreen, pun intended, debate. Real or artificial? We break down the pros, cons, and look at what you might not realize about the industry. Yes, there are real numbers behind the nostalgia. Canada's Christmas tree industry remains a substantial business. Canadian tree farms produce roughly 3 to 6 million trees annually. Choosing a real tree supports local growers, especially in top-producing provinces like Quebec, Nova Scotia, and Ontario. Meanwhile, artificial trees, mostly imported, raise environmental concerns. They're plastic, often shipped long distances, and may take decades to break even over their lifetime, or break even, I should say, in their lifetime. So, we also have one other passionate natural tree supporter, and let's hear from him.
Hello, Gary. Eddie Tekalik on assignment in Sherman Oaks for Night Talk Canada. Gary, that is some segment 3 you're having tonight, and it's all about the big debate, artificial or real Christmas tree. And I thought I'd throw in my 2 cents while I'm on my way home today, back to beautiful Canada. Well, you know what? At least here in California, it seems to be leaning towards artificial Christmas tree. Our family down here have put up their artificial Christmas tree. I, for one, Gary, would like to throw in my 5 cents again, and 10 cents and my loony and toony. I am all about the real McCoy, the real Christmas tree, the Chevy Chase Vacation Christmas tree, the bigger, the bolder, the better. It has to be au naturel. Waking up in the morning to the, I don't know what you want to call that beautiful smell of pine tar in the morning. It's just something you cannot replace. So I'm throwing my vote, and everyone is going to be the natural Christmas tree. On assignment, Eddie Calic for Night Talk Canada. Good night, and I will see you next week.
Love it.
He recorded that, I guess, earlier this morning before he left to head out to the airport to fly home. So now we know where Eddie stands, and we want to know where you stand, real or artificial, and why. Share your opinions in the comments. We really do want to have some fun with this. It is a debate that just keeps coming around every year. So let's get into it. First of all, Greg, real or
Well,
artificial?
no question. I'm not only with Eddie, but since 1978, I have resided in the Rentforth and now Rossay community. I have always had anywhere between a 6 and an 8 foot natural tree. And I'll tell you why. The natural tree, as Eddie pointed out, it behooves me to agree with Eddie as a Habs fan, but in any event, not only the smell of the natural tree after the use can be repurposed for a whole raft of things. When it's recycled, as we have gone, the recycling serves many, many purposes, including bedding for animals, gardens, etc., etc. And even if it goes to the landfill in a recycled fashion, it broken down will serve for less carbon footprint. A natural tree also brings the sense of a real Christmas. The artificial, I've never seen, despite how expensive they can be, ever replicate that. So that's number one. Number two, if you really look at it, and even of a cost-benefit analysis, an artificial tree, for it to look reasonably well, you're going to pay $400-500, and you're likely only to get 7 to 10 years out of it, if you're lucky. If you're lucky, and that is not even looking at the bacteria that it builds up, the storage problem that you have to find a space for it year after year after year. And it just makes no sense, because if you pay the freight on a real Christmas tree, even at say $50 or $60, 10 years, $600, there's your fresh tree, and you get a fresh tree every year. And so I'm sold, and we have always had a fresh tree, normally from the province of New Brunswick, and we love it. And the beauty of the exercising our recycling style, if you want, is the community has drop-off sites where you can drop your tree off and they will discard it for you by recycling it. So it's been made very, very, very convenient to continue to have a real tree.
Well, first of all, hello back to Kate and Dorval. And Reimer S has weighed in. Artificial is less messy for sure. And we put those comments up a moment ago. I like the natural tree, but somehow over the last few years, the natural tree has not liked me. And it was almost a Christmas tradition that a day or two after I would put up the tree and we'd get it decorated, early in the morning we'd hear a swish and tinkle, bang, and come out and find the tree had fallen over. So switched over to the artificial trees because we were going into a condo, smaller area and everything, and so we did the artificial tree, and fast and easy, pack it away and then bring it out. However, I think it was our first Christmas in the condo, and put the artificial tree up. The alarm had gone off at 5, and I was just getting out of bed, and I hear whoosh and tingle, tingle, and go out. And the tradition continued, even with the artificial tree. It was down across the coffee table. So I don't know. Like getting the tree out, especially if you're living in a condo building, for example, getting the tree out, if you're even allowed to have a natural tree, is a real pain in the butt without making a huge mess. Even when you have the big bags that you can put up around them, you still end up with a mess. But like even taking the artificial trees down, some of the stuff starts falling off after a while too. It kind of wears away. So I like the artificial tree we have at the moment. It's only 2 years old, I think, and it fills the bill nicely. Doesn't take up a whole lot of room, and it's up and down inside of an hour. Deborah does a really great job of that. Yeah, I can't see me going back to a natural tree whatsoever. And just before we go back to comments, the most recent figure available for the value of natural Christmas tree sales in Canada is nearly $189 million in cash receipts received by Canadian Christmas tree producers in 2023. And the figure includes both domestic sales within Canada and exports to international markets. Of course, the biggest market would be the United States. I didn't like when I saw that number, like that's a heck of a lot higher than what I thought it was going to be. Now, I did see a report yesterday, and it was on a CTV station in Winnipeg, and the Christmas tree seller was talking to a retailer or wholesaler in Nova Scotia. And the wholesaler in Nova Scotia said with the tariffs that the orders for trees from the US pretty much dried up for him. And I never really thought that it would have any kind of an impact on something like a Christmas tree, but yeah, that's the size of it. But 189 million in 2023, that's a lot of money. Okay, let's go back and see if I can get caught up here. Okay, Jen comes back in with, as someone who lives in a condo in a city, I would have no idea where or what to do with a real tree after Christmas. I think, I'm trying to remember last year if the city came around and picked them up and shredded them on the spot. They went around and they were shredding on the spot. I think that was it. That's if you're allowed to have one in your condo. And she says, oh, she agrees that it is easier for city living, condo living people. A real tree makes Christmas feel more like Christmas, though. And wow, she's really weighing in. I also think when we were younger, the fear of real Christmas trees catching on fire was drilled into us. Well, there is that.
I think Jen brings up some very good points. And, perhaps I should apologize to our viewers about my passion, 45 or 50 years with a real tree, because in the final analysis, it's really what works for you. I've never lived in a condo for any length of time other than when I was at Dalhousie University. And so, yeah, the real factor is what do you do if you're living on the 10th floor and higher, and you got to lug a tree through the hallway or up the elevator, et cetera. And then when you take it down, even with the bagged approach that you can do now, and the bags are even recyclable, they still lose their pine cones or needles and whatever. So there's a lot of practical issues that people have to weigh depending on their living situation. But I think almost to a fault, people will agree that a natural tree seemingly makes for, I don't know, Christmas more wholesome. We bring back our childhood days, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about artificial that we rarely talk about, other than the convenient factor, is these things are shipped from usually out of country in a third world country, and they're made up of fabric and materials that one really has to be very cautious about because of things like the bacteria that they can create and how they seem to pick up dust bites and all that kind of stuff. And we really don't know what that's like. Not to mention, as I had mentioned in my first commentary, about space. So if someone's got the space and they like the convenience and that kind of stuff, I've seen a few artificial trees in use, and I've seen as much of a mess than in live. But I would argue that the live tree is far more messier, and it really depends on the personal preference of whoever has the tree.
Well, you can you see them now more and more. The potted Christmas trees, living Christmas trees. You can bring one of those home and decorate it and just carry it on for the next year, kind of thing. Let's go back to the comments for a minute. We have another comment and brings up a really good point here. Reimer Rest says, another tree war is, are you ready for this? How long before Christmas the tree can be in the living room? And there's a lot to be said for that one. Now, it was the week before Halloween, and there was one individual in our neighborhood who had their tree up, decorated, and turned on. Like this was probably around October 27th, 28th, something like that. Now it's an artificial tree, so you put it up and you kind of forget about it. But like, really, that's I even as far as stores being decorated in the Christmas music, I always use November 11th, Remembrance Day, as the line. You don't do anything before that. After Remembrance Day, okay, then you can start sliding into the Christmas rush. But now it's like everything else. We're flooded with Black Friday deals almost from September through to Black Friday, and then they wonder why everybody's kind of sitting around like on Black Friday because they've spent all of their money beforehand, and you're not getting the big lost leaders that you used to get because the retailers are spreading it out over a 6 to 8 week period. So you're not getting that aspect of it. It just really gets lost, gets old. And I'll tell you something else. There was one year, a few years back, about 20 years ago, where I was in British Columbia and I didn't have a tree. And you know what? I didn't really miss it. I had no decorations in my apartment whatsoever. But the minute I went out the door, there were all kinds of decorations on houses in the neighborhood and in the stores and everything, and walk by trees decorated on front lawns. that was enough for me. But then I wasn't planning on any major Christmas celebration anyway, so it didn't matter. So let's go back to the comments. And Jen comes back with, I never thought about bacteria in the materials used for the artificial trees. Good thought. But what about the possibilities of bugs a real one brings in? Or squirrels like in National Lampoon's movie mentioned. There is that.
Leave it to Jen to bring that in. There.
Yeah, my favorite movie. With everything going on in the world right now, let us have a little holiday cheer in October, Gary.
Well, you can come to the Maritimes and you can have Oktoberfest.
Yeah,
And
there
in
you go.
Ontario, there you go.
Yeah.
Oktoberfest.
And then Reimer S says, I usually go for the first weekend of December. And I remember as a kid, that was around the time that we'd start with the Christmas decorations around the house. And I think maybe the second weekend we'd go out, and we were living in Oromocto at the time in New Brunswick. And so we go out on sometimes to the training area, the base Gagetown training area, which for people who aren't aware is next door to Oromocto. It's all one big community, so to speak. You can go out and cut the tree, and much like a National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and bring it home on top of the car, and then get it up and decorate it. And again, that was usually, I think, the second weekend in December is when. Now I know Mom would start putting things out like around the first part of December, but then the tree was around the second weekend of December. Now we don't really have a set schedule for the tree. It's whenever we kind of think of it and get around to doing it, as long as it's up before Christmas Eve. So, but it's a magical time of year. There's a very serious part of it, but there's also a very magical, happy-go-lucky time as well. And who am I to say, like, why should I be the Grinch and put a damper on somebody's Christmas? And speaking of that, as far as a magical time of the year, but yet there's a serious time of the year, Greg's coming back next week, and we're going to be talking about dealing with stress and the strain of Christmas and expectations and everything on next week's show. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. Any little tidbits that you want to tease on that, Greg?
Well, I would use one that's just popped up recently, and that is when people look at Christmas and Christmas dinner. Bringing family around, that can be very stressful, and everyone has to be on their best behavior. And do we, in fact, opt out and find a restaurant that triple charges roast beef or turkey dinner, which would normally go for 15 or 20 bucks a plate? You're paying $49.95 for a Christmas dinner out. Or do you get a restaurant that now is offering catering, and they'll supply everything? And the argument being made is, why would the average family spend 5-6 hours preparing Christmas dinner that's going to last from sitting down to the last drink of wine, an hour and a half at the dining room table? So do people who are really stressed out want to put themselves through 6-7 hours of preparing a turkey dinner, or do they want to look at options that they contract that particular service out? Food for thought.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the message of next week is going to be, how do we as human beings control the controllables? What
All
are the
right.
kinds of things in our life that we can control and do something about? And how passionate are we that we buy in and take control of the things in our life that we can control? And we will find that if we can control the controllables, everything else will fall into place quite nicely.
Okay. So I'm looking forward to that for sure. And the consensus is that artificial is coming out in front as far as the comments so far. And if you're watching later on, leave a comment and let us know, are you a natural or an artificial tree person? And when do you put the tree up? That's a good one, and thanks for to Rhyme or Rest for bringing that one up. I forgot about that. That's a really good point to bring up as well. And remember,
When do you take it down?
oh, there's the other side of it.
Yeah, because those of us who follow the Christian faith literally always think of Little Christmas and our Ukrainian friends that have the little Epiphany.
Hmm.
And so I try to get villages and communities to have their recycling after that particular day, but most people have the tree up so early to keep it up in your house, until January the 6th plus
That's a
is a long,
stretch.
long time. That's a
Yeah,
stretch.
yeah. For a natural tree, a real stretch
Yeah,
because they're cut so far in advance now too, and to get them out and everything. So yeah.
yeah.
Well, certainly, again, as I say, if you're watching the replays after the fact, leave us a comment. We'd really like to know what your thoughts are on this. And remember, if you are buying a natural tree, you're supporting someone who has a small business and making a few bucks. So there's that aspect of it as well. Okay, and you know what? That's going to bring us to the end of episode 62 of Night Talk Canada. If you like what you heard, hit that like button, subscribe, follow, and share. Don't forget to follow our Facebook page, our YouTube channel. We're also on YouTube Shorts, Facebook Reels, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you're watching any of the replays of tonight's episode, as we say, keep the conversation going and leave a comment below. It really does help us. Special thanks to Greg Zed for filling in tonight for Eddie. Honest,
You're welcome.
unfiltered Canadian, the conversation we should be having. Night Talk Canada returns in 7 days. I'm Gary MacDonald. Good night.